Welcome back to the Athletes Podcast. This is episode 85 featuring JT Barnett, a former professional hockey player, now turned entrepreneur. He is crushing TikTok. He's dominating Triple Deke. The guy's everywhere. He's a legit human being. He possesses a lot of the qualities that I look up to and admire in an individual. And I'm super excited for you guys to watch the 85th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring JT Barnett. Here we go. I think it looks fine, man. You're golden.
Cool.
Let's dope. Let's dive in. Tell me who JT Barnett was growing up as an athlete. You played puck growing up in Scottsdale. I'm sure there was a bit of the hockey vibe there. Maybe not as much as up north, but give us some background on who JT Barnett is.
So JT Barnett, growing up, was super into sports. I could name every hockey player on every team probably by the age of like 10, like probably by the age of third, fourth grade. I was really, really into hockey. It was my passion. My second passion was always computers and video games. So like my family had a one of those iMacs, like the translucent blue green like color, like one, like I think it was like a turquoise one that was in like our living room, like our family room. And that for me was where I really learned about a lot of like the technology and stuff that I'm into. I would say the iMac mixed with PlayStation and Xbox and Game Boy, like that was, so I would say that those were my two passions. Like I was the athlete that really, really cared deeply about hockey. Obviously my dad's background, I'm sure we'll get into that and stuff too. And then this other passion of mine too, the technology and the internet, like, and it was just coming out too, like right when I was born and when I was like growing up, internet was just starting to become a thing. So those were the two things that I was really passionate about.
It's so cool because it makes sense now. You're seeing success on TikTok, on Instagram, different social media platforms, and obviously you've found your groove and your niche where you've been able to excel. What kind of allowed you to have that comfort to know that you were going to be able to excel kind of at whatever you found a passion in?
Dude, honestly, I think like I was born as a kid that was just super curious, was like just very like, and I don't want to say wild, but just like energetic. Like I'm a middle child.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if there's like if anybody that listens that's a middle child like resonates with that, but like I was almost like I wasn't one of the oldest kids in my family, so I didn't have like that same responsibility, but I also wasn't one of the youngest, so I wasn't babied, so I was kind of like independent, but was also like I definitely played the role of being like the hype man, or being like the one that just like the ringleader, got everybody going. And so I always just loved like entertaining. Like I loved like being crazy around the house, dancing, singing, making people laugh. Like just like that was just what I loved. And I think that like the internet definitely showed me that like that's something that people do, not just for a living, but like that's something that a lot of people do on the internet, like that like gets them to build a following and stuff like that. And I think I learned that later throughout the years, but I definitely think that my childhood of me being a middle child and like being that entertainer in the house has added an element into like what I'm passionate about today.
100%. Were you the glue guy in the D room too then?
100%. I love that you said that, because I'm sure you saw like me posting about the glue guy, because it's just in my opinion, such a overlooked person, such an overlooked talent, being the glue guy. And by the glue guy, like what I mean by glue guy is just like being the person that is emotionally responsible for others. And I don't necessarily mean responsible like they necessarily take it all on them, but I mean like they are first and foremost like looking out to make sure that everybody is emotionally in a good place. Like vibes are high, they're feeling good, they're happy, like that. I mean, that I think is like what the glue guy is. They're connected. And so that's my opinion on what a glue guy is. And I just don't think it's valued as much as the person that in sports puts up points. And I was that glue guy. So I definitely have gone through that. Like, dude, every team I was on, I wasn't I never have been like extremely wild in the sense that like everybody knows the guy on the team that will just like do anything. Like I wasn't that dude. I wasn't like I don't want to say, I don't think clown is, I think that that's like a bad reputation, but almost like the person that will just like do whatever for the boys or for like her to make people laugh. That wasn't me. I was more like the mom. I was more like, I wanted everybody to be happy. I want everybody to be like in good vibes, make sure everybody's doing well. Like make sure people are like in good spirits, and like also like bring some like flavor to the room. I like playing music and that kind of stuff. And I definitely think that it's something that is like not respected as much as like the people that put up points in the short term. Cause I do think that players in the long term, like I think if you can carve out that glue guy role, I think that there is captains now that are like, you get compensated and you get that respect. But yeah, I just think like glue guy, so underrated, so undervalued, and is something that is just so immensely beneficial.
Yeah, I remember you going on that tangent on your Instagram, and I was like, dude, I totally agree with everything you're saying. And it's funny. So for me growing up, I was a tendy, and so I couldn't necessarily be that glue guy on the ice because I'm in,
Totally.
you know, my crease. But I
Totally.
was always yapping with the boys when they're coming around, making sure everyone's in good spirits in between periods. Like you got to do those things to make sure that your team is working at an efficient and effective level and going to see success long term, because you know there's ups and downs in every sport and every game, but what's important is keeping that even keel mentality throughout. And I think that's a testament to why, you know, you were able to, whether it was playing hockey or now on social media, you're staying even keel. You don't get too high on your highs or low on your lows, which is so important. And I think like, so May being mental health month, this is something that I thought would be interesting for us to tie in here, because athletes don't typically talk as much. It's starting to now, but athletes, it didn't used to be a custom thing for athletes to talk about their mental health and how they're doing. Guys like Robin Leonard weren't speaking out 10, 20 years ago. Now it's becoming more of a conversation. How do you think that that is going to continue to progress? And what do you think maybe are some aspects that we need to do as individuals in the athletic space to continuing on that conversation?
Yeah, dude, it's a great question. Like I look at mental health the same way I look at physical health. Like I look at it like, for anybody that's like trying to get into better shape physically, you go to a personal trainer, and like that's like what you do. Like anybody that, if you're about to run a marathon, or if you're about to go and compete in it for athletes, like if you're about to play an upcoming season and you know like you need to elevate your performance for that season, like you're gonna go and hire a trainer. Like you're not gonna think like, especially if you're somebody that hasn't lifted and hasn't trained at like a crazy high level, like you are gonna immediately, the first thing you're gonna do is go and seek out somebody that like knows the foundation of training. And so I look at mental health the same way. Like I think that we just we as like a society haven't put enough emphasis on like the strength and the way that we look at things, our perspectives in our mind. And so I think for me, like going to a therapist is the exact same thing for me as going to a personal trainer. And I'm literally not joking. Like I'll set aside when I'm like budgeting out, like looking at like what I want to spend on each month and whatever. For me now with my businesses, I'm like, cool. If I'm spending $300 on a personal trainer per month, like I'm going to spend $300 on a therapist. And it doesn't have to necessarily be like a therapist, like I also think a performance coach. I also think like a mindset coach, but somebody that is going to get me to feel my emotions, work through the things that are going on internally, and then allow me to perform better. And I just think it's like, dude, it's just such a game changer. Like the way that for me, everything comes back to emotions. Cause I think that that's just something that is just hard for everybody to sit with. But, for me, as a natural performer, both as an athlete, both as on social media, as doing podcasts, like whatever, going and talking to somebody about like how I'm feeling mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, if you believe in something like that, has been like just an enormous game changer for me.
Yeah. It's liberating, because typically you don't have those conversations. Like maybe you have a girlfriend, which brings up happy 4 years with Sammy, by the way.
Thank you.
I've had to make sure I brought that up, but
I appreciate that.
that's there's certain aspects of that life that come at you and hit at different waves and hit at different times, and maybe you weren't ready to process that 4 years ago. The fact that you got caught from your hockey team, but now those emotions are coming up, and you're like, oh man, like I really do feel crappy about that, and I haven't addressed those feelings. And like that's something that people don't necessarily realize, and then they're like, why am I depressed and feeling down? And it's like, okay, all of these things have been adding up and I haven't dealt with them. It's like, I don't know, such a game changer, like you said.
Bro, it is. You're so spot on, and like I love the way that you put that too, because it's the truth that like when you're younger, in majority of the stuff that people that in my personal opinion and what studies have shown is like majority of the stuff that people need to work through is childhood stuff. So like birth up until like age 15, that's usually when you're like shaping your adult life. So like what happens is if you have an experience, if something happens that is too overwhelming for you emotionally at that age, and that is literally based off of your sensitivity. So it's based off of you as a human being, how emotional you are. So that could literally be like your parent telling you that you did something wrong. That could be you getting in an actual fist fight. That could be something farther as abuse, but it could be something way, way easier, way more like what people would refer to as like, that wasn't that bad.
And failing a math test.
Exactly. Getting cut from a team, getting cut, like getting somebody calling you a name, like something like that like when you look back at, you're like, there's no way that like left me like feelings that I need to process now. But like when you're that age, anything that overwhelms you sticks with you because your body can't process it in that moment. So like literally what happens is like in that moment, something happens, it's too overwhelming for you. So your body, to protect itself, goes, nope, we're not feeling this. We're going to either focus on something else or we're going to block this out. And later on in life, and it's amazing that your body does that. Like it's survival. It's like it's literally how you survive certain situations. And later on in life, what ends up happening is like anything that is similar to that situation that happened when you were a kid now brings up those same emotions. And because you haven't dealt with them in the past and you haven't dealt with them in the present, like now anything that happens that repeats that situation brings you right back to that moment when you were a kid. And so what therapy has allowed for me is first understanding that of like, okay, like underneath all of this, underneath anything that is going like wrong. And when I say wrong, like anytime I feel anxious, anytime I feel like I'm overwhelmed, anytime I feel like I'm off, like typically what has happened for me is there's emotions that I need to sit with. So like I need to sit and feel like these feelings. And then once I feel them, I'm like, all right, where does this feel like this came from? Like this feels like it came from when a coach was yelling at me when I was 14, 15, 16, or this feels like, oh, when I moved away from my family, like whatever it is, feeling that feeling and then like allowing it and then like understanding and expressing it is what I would consider processing it. And then like you come back to sitting with yourself in the present, you're like, I can handle emotions. Like it's never as bad as you think it is. You always think it's going to be like this crazy, like again, overwhelming experience. But like we forget that like we're adults now, you're stronger now, you can deal with it now. And so to summarize all of that, like, dude, it is mind blowing the way that I feel when I allow myself to feel my emotions, sit with my emotions, express my emotions, work through them. Like I just like, you literally feel fearless. Like you literally feel like I can take on whatever. Like I can take, there's really not that much in the world as an adult that is life threatening, like a death of a family member is something that would really rock me. Like, there's some things that would really like make me have to spend more time. But for the most part, living through your day to day, if you can handle emotions and you know how to communicate, you can get through a real serious amount of things. So it's just been like, it's been really, really, really beneficial. I couldn't recommend it more. And whatever that is for you, if that's a therapist, if that's a mindset coach, if that's like if you're more spiritual, if it's something more like yoga, if you're less spiritual, if it's more like literally a business coach, like just talking about your emotions and how you're feeling is like, it's a game changer.
Yeah. And I think, when we relate it back to athletes specifically, it's like people forget that they're real human beings at the end of the day. Like everyone's still a human being. They still feel the same emotions that you felt if you missed that shot in the fourth quarter. Yet
Yep.
he's doing it on a world stage, and now he's got 10,000 people bombarding him, tweeting at him, tagging him, and like that's the part that people lose sight of. I think with professional sport is that they disregard the fact that that person's still a human being, and it can just be so negative, toxic, and it's unfortunate. But let's bring it up to
I
a
think,
lighter.
wait, no,
Go
I
ahead.
want to jump in on that really quick.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. I think that is because I think social media has really changed that, because I think that like 10 years ago, being a professional athlete was so ridiculously different than an average person's life that it almost didn't seem relatable in any sense of the word. So I think like when you're watching things on TV, same with celebrities,
Yeah.
like famous entrepreneurs, like when you're watching them, when we're watching them on TV as a kid and there's no social media and you're only getting to see them in those games. I think that there's like such a disconnect between the everyday person that people don't look at them as real people. They look at them as, oh, they're a celebrity, they're a professional athlete. Like they don't deal with any of the same things I do. And I think now with social media, where you're able to see like more, especially for athletes that aren't hockey players, that like document and show like their life, you're able to see that LeBron James is actually a father. He actually has to deal with family stuff. He actually has to do like, he deals with things that normal people do. And I think you just see like that there's a little bit, it's a little bit less removed from the everyday person than it was before. And I think that that's where it's like now people are starting to recognize like, oh, maybe these celebrities and maybe these athletes and stuff are actual people that like we should be a little bit more empathetic to. And I'm glad that that's happening, because I think that should happen.
Totally. And you bring up an interesting point. So you played hockey both in North America and across the pond. Why do you think hockey players don't necessarily document or share their story as much? I know it's something you scratched
It's
on,
in the
but like,
culture.
yeah, right? Is it just because it's the culture that just doesn't accept it yet?
It's the culture that hockey was born into, which was literally such a different time. That was like, if you did step out of line and show yourself in a way that made you an individual, you actually might get cut, or you actually might not have a job. And because of that, like this society at that time was, you need to get a job for your family and put food on the table. And that's how you become a man. That's what you do as a man. And so that's where they have created all of this, like all of these models of how to be a hockey player. This is my opinion. This is how they created all those models of how to be a hockey player. You don't step out of line. When you answer questions, you answer them in a way that supports your team and looks good for the team. You always hold your coach to on a pedestal, to where you never disagree with your coach. You never go against something that your coach or one of the higher ups on the team says, the way that they look at things. And I think that model was based off of the way that they were living at the time, where that was needed. And I think that now it's no longer needed. And so what I try to do is emphasize, like, we got to adapt. Like players are going to inevitably run the league more than coaches and GMs. It's going to happen in 10 years. In 10 years, players are going to be making the decisions of who they want on their team. It's already happening in the NBA. It's already happening in soccer. It's going to start happening. It's in football. It's going to start happening in hockey, whether the ownership or the management or coaching staff wants to agree with that. And so I think, like, it's not a bad thing. It's just the way that we have adapted as a society. It's no longer needed the model that they had before. So I think that it's like, I'm like, let's start getting this going now, because we can take advantage of this and we can bring in more revenue, which is good for everybody. So let the players market themselves. Let them become the face of the brand. You want a player to be the face. You want you want people to think of the Toronto Maple Leafs as watching Austin Matthews play, more than you want them to think of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It'll
100%.
make you more money. It'll literally make you more
100%.
money. And I think that them marketing and accepting that and being like, yes, we play for the emblem on the front, but like the name on the back for a lot of these guys is just as important for us to make money and for us to bring in more fans. And so like, let's market that. Like in NBA, a lot of people you don't know the Houston Rockets. Like, you know, people on that team, you know, it's the Lakers, but it's LeBron, you know, so Kawhi, nobody really cares about the Clippers. They care about Kawhi. So it's like, you know, that's going to happen in the NHL. It's going to take some players that one, either have like real balls to do it, or an ownership group that comes in and is an ownership or management group that comes in and is like, hey, we're actually going to go real new school and like really market our players. But one team's going to do it and going to do it really well. And then every other team's going to do it.
Yeah. And it'll be sick when it happens too, because the results are probably going to be incredible.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Any picks? Who do you think is going to happen?
I would love to see Austin be that guy, because I think that he obviously like breaks the barrier between hockey and culture and street culture more than anybody else in the league right now. And because he backs it up on the ice. I would love to see that guy. Austin's a little bit more low key of a dude. Like, I don't know if he really wants to be that like in the spotlight. He is in the spotlight naturally just because he's good, but I don't know if he wants to like be vlogging and talking into cameras and stuff. But I do think that he has mass appeal to be somebody like a LeBron that spans across, like a OBJ that spans across. So we'll see.
Yeah, I like it. Have you been watching any playoff hockey?
I watched a couple games in the last couple days. Yeah,
dude, it's been ridiculous.
It has been like surprisingly violent.
Right? I was like, I guess there's a lot of pent up testosterone from playing against the same teams for 6 months, right?
Very much. Honestly, that's a good point. I actually didn't even think about that, because it's same division for so long. I also think like, dude, you got to think like going through a year and a half of COVID and like just like being away, not being away from your families, because I think a lot of them have been with their families, but I mean like just not living normal life. This is a job still, so you have to do things that you don't want to do. So like, I think there's definitely reasons for there to be aggression, but I will say I am surprised at how like physical and how many fights and stuff there has been.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting next couple series here. I think as they progress through the rounds, it'll be interesting once the conferences meet too, because those teams have never played each other. And then even cup final, again, teams have never played. So it'll be really interesting how the rivalries stack up and what happens. My Canucks are out of it, so I can just watch Leafs and watch when they lose and smile. Let's talk about kind of your hockey career. You played on a sick team in 08 with the Giants. I was there as what would have been like grade 6 watching Giants hockey, but like you're on Brendan Gallagher's team. David Musil was a plus 33 that year. I saw that and I was like, I have to bring that up. Tell me about that squad.
Yeah, dude. So like I loved that group of guys. It was the 07 and 08. Honestly, like I loved majority of the groups of the guys that I played with in the dub. That year was very different for me because it was a lot of change. I'm talking about my 16-year-old year. It was a lot of change. It was really a hard year for me because I was away from home. I was a 16-year-old on a team that had just won the Memorial Cup. That was a stacked team. Like, as you said, Gallagher was 16 too. Really good 16-year-old. Kane, plenty of guys that went and played in Europe. David was actually the next year, but he was there for a tiny bit with us that year. There was some real players on that team. And that coach, Don Hay, was like notorious for being hard, for being a very challenging coach. And I think for me as a kid from Arizona that literally grew up in Palm Springs, California, and then Arizona, Palm Springs, Los Angeles, and then Arizona, my values and my makeup was good vibes, chill, have fun, joking, skill. Like I was like trying, like dangling kid. Like that was like what I grew up doing was like, I didn't want to be a grind. Like I was never like trying to be a grinder, I liked playing physical just because I was a thicker kid, but going from my makeup in Arizona to going to Vancouver and playing for Don was really hard for me. Was really hard as a kid. And I was away from home and I was luckily the guys on the team in that 16-year-old year were really good dudes. Lance Boma, Craig Cunningham, like so many guys that like James Henry, so many guys that went on to play pro and some of them are still even playing.
Mm-hmm.
That like took me under their wing and like were just like brothers to me. So it made it a year that I look back at it and I'm like, there's so many things that I did not like about this year, about this season. Like Don was not my kind of coach.
Yeah.
The living away from home for me was really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But there is also so many things from that year that I absolutely am so grateful for. Like being part of a winning team, no matter how you get there, is something that is, as an experience is like once in a lifetime, not once in a lifetime, but is an experience that really helps you understand what it takes to win. The preparation that we put in on that team was ridiculous.
Tell me about it.
Like learning that, literally going to the rink, having a coaching session, then having practice, then training, then having another video session afterwards. Like it was just another level. Like it was pro.
Yeah.
Like it was, I'll put it this way. My 16-year-old year, 17-year-old year, 18-year-old, like all of my junior teams that I was on, I legitimately think that 90% of them prepared more than any pro team I played on.
Wild.
It
Good old
was
dub.
the dub. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy. And so like the preparation, the way that the things that I learned about like how to take care of myself, making friends with strangers in another country, like the amount of traveling that I've done from playing hockey has
Mm-hmm.
made me a very worldly person. Like I can connect with anybody. I understand like different locations. Like, so there was a lot of really good things from it. And so I look back at that experience, 16 and 17 in Vancouver, of being like, this is something that I will cherish for the rest of my life, and something that I also learned a lot of what I don't want to do as a leader and don't want to do when I do things my own way.
Right. That's interesting that you're able to pull that, like, especially at an age of 16 years old, right? And it's probably been, over the past decade that you've been unfolding that and kind of realizing some of those things and where you've been able to maybe make adjustments so that you can adapt it and make it your own. Yeah.
And still to this day, just we were just talking about like processing emotions and like feeling emotions and stuff like that. And now is like, I would say one of the first times where I feel like I'm in such a good place with with everything that's going on in my life, that I'm allowing some of those emotions to come up and be like, damn, like that actually was really hard. Like I didn't really even recognize that being away from home was going to be really challenging for me. And like, now I'm like, damn, like good for me. Like I got through that and was able to make friends and was able to do this and that. And like, I'm proud of myself for that. And like, I'm pumped that I was able to pull like good from it and like process the bad from it. Like that is exactly how we started this, of like understanding and processing and like moving. Like I'm still doing that to this day.
Yeah. Well, you should be proud of it, man. You've done some incredible things. It's kudos to you for just sticking to it. And I think
bro.
I think that's where what I gain so much from having these conversations is like, I love finding out like kind of what the misconceptions were for people and what they had. For you specifically, going through pro hockey, even going into the dub, coming from Scottsdale, coming from Los Angeles, what are some of the things that you expected to see in pro hockey and maybe didn't see, or vice versa? Like, I'm sure you got a million stories, and I know you got a hard stop in 15, but
I think it is the most over glamorized industry. I'll say this: professional sports, one league below the top. So like minor league pro sports, because you still have that title of like, I'm a pro athlete, I'm a professional athlete. I mean, like, we'll start at the basis of like money. Like what you think that guys are making is so far off of what guys are making. Even like American Hockey League, even like the G League in basketball, like it is just not as glamorous as people think. And living situation, dude, it's funny because it's like, I think back at it now and I'm like, bro, if people could see like what the dorm, and I played in Russia, and I lived in a military dorm. with 3 other people on less than twin beds. I did that for I was in Russia for 8 months, eating 3 meals a day in a cafeteria, not knowing what food I was eating half of the time.
Oh God.
In the dub, you do a lot of like in the dub, I would say the thing that was probably the most challenging was the bus rides, especially 16 and 17-year-old, because like 16 and 17-year-old, like you're at the front of the bus, you're sleeping on the ground, or you're sleeping upright in a chair, sometimes doubling up, sometimes sitting with a person next, like right with you, another 16-year-old, and this is like a 7-hour trip that you're sleeping like that. So like those are things that like it definitely made me tougher, more resilient. But like looking back at it, I'm like, geez, it was just like ridiculous.
Right? Brad Keller was on the show probably 10, 15 episodes ago. He's starting pitcher for the Kansas City Royals. And he was telling us a story about, I think it was a couple of years before he signed his contract, but he's living with 5 guys in a random house down playing AA ball. And just like they're scrounging enough to get like a plastic table to play beer pong on and like enough for bologna sandwiches. Like professional sports is such a grind, and we only see the very top of the top, and everyone assumes that all athletes are like that, and it's just so far from the truth.
Even just like thinking about it right now, like when I was in the ECHL, I was arguing with my coach to bump my pay from $525 a week to like $550. That was before taxes. And I remember like guys on my team were like pumped that they got $750 a week. They got like $900 a week was crazy. I look at that now, and that's before taxes. So like after that, I'm, it's like $550 a week after taxes in that league. I'm probably making like $300 a week. Like, dude, you like looking back at it now, it's like, you don't play the game for the money.
No.
In minor leagues, you're not playing for money, no matter who. There's maybe one person on the team, and it's the captain that has been there for like 9 years and is just like going to be there forever. And they're making like somewhat of a regular job salary. But outside of that, everybody is playing because they're passionate about it and because they're still chasing a dream of potentially playing in like the big league, or an experience of getting to travel and play, or getting to go and do something else and play. So I look back at it now. I wouldn't change anything. I literally like, even my experience with Vancouver and Don and other coaches that were really hard, and getting cut from teams and going from the KHL to the ECHL, which was a massive step down. Like looking back at every single thing that I did, there is not one thing that I would change or I would take back, because I look at it like everything has led me to where I'm at right now. And if I went back and would change that one thing, maybe I don't send my girlfriend a DM and now I'm dating her, and maybe I don't meet her, or maybe I don't make the move to Los Angeles and I'm still in Scottsdale and I'm working, at a bar or so, whatever it is, it hasn't, everything that has happened has led me to exactly where I'm at right now. So I don't change anything for it, but saying that I allow myself to feel how I actually should have felt in those moments, to be like, cool, I'm moving on from this. This is no longer something that like gets me down or holds me back or doesn't allow me to go out and pursue my dreams, pursue what I want to do. I'm going to allow myself to feel that so that I can move forward.
Yeah, 100%. I could not agree more. I think if people can consume or take in one part of this conversation, it should be like what you've been able to share there, and your ability to understand and process what you've gone through and how it affects who you are today. And ultimately, like, you're right, you don't want to change anything, because it could have had completely different. You might not have met Sammy, and then everything changes. So it's cool.
100%.
You're a Gary Vee guy too, right? Like, you follow some of his stuff. You appreciate his empathy that he brings to the table at times. I'd love to know if you have other individuals that you kind of look at and kind of draw some maybe inspiration from. I mean, a guy like, you like cold showers too. I'm hooked on cold showers. Wim Hof maybe wasn't the guy who initially showcased it to you, but what else? Like, who are you drawing that inspiration from?
Yeah. So like, I'll just touch on Gary quickly. Gary is the dude that, out of anybody that I've listened to, I probably went through 2 or 3 years where I was really into self-help. And like, even just thinking about it right now, I think that probably stemmed from being a pro, like once I turned ECHL and was playing on, I went through I was on 3 different teams in 4 years. And when I was going through those teams, I started to recognize like patterns of just like things that were happening, like stuff with coaches where I like wouldn't agree with a coach, or where I would like just not even a coach or an organization where I'd be like, this isn't even fun for me anymore. Like that kind of stuff. I started recognizing patterns, and I was like, I don't feel like very happy with my career right now. Like I'm doing it as like a side hustle now. I'm spending majority of my time on my music production, on my stuff on the internet, on social media. And that is my real passion. And and hockey is now on the back burner for me. And I wanted to understand more about like what it was that I was interested in, why I was having such a hard time with hockey, what I wanted to do next. And so I started getting into self-help. And I think the first thing that really got me into it was like motivational speaking. It was like Les Brown, Greg Plitt, like bodybuilders and stuff like that, CT Fletcher, ET, the hip hop preacher. If you guys have heard, like, if you gotta want it as bad as you want to breathe.
Yeah.
Like
Eric
that,
Thomas,
like,
baby. Oh yeah.
Eric Thomas. Yeah. So like those kind of people that were like real, like get you motivated. That was like what got me into it. And then that took me into more of like, I would say a little bit more like mindful stuff. So like that took me into Tim Ferriss. I was always into Joe Rogan. I was always listening to a lot of Joe Rogan. And so that was like intellectual conversations and like thinking about like personality and like and then like childhood and like all of that stuff. And that all led me to Gary. And Gary and at first when I listened to Gary, I was like, he's an entrepreneur. I don't even know. I'm not even really like interested in entrepreneurs. I look at entrepreneurs as like dudes that fly planes and like are on a jet and like making billions of dollars.
Stereotypical
100%. And I was a hockey player. So like, I wasn't like, I didn't know that I was going to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know how much I really enjoyed the business life. But when I found Gary and he started talking about, I saw videos that started talking about empathy and kindness and caring and gratitude and compassion. And these were only subjects that I had listened to from like therapists or like psychologists or like mental health blogs. Like I had only seen these topics talked about by particularly women and like really soft, like emotional, like pages that I followed that I loved. And so hearing that kind of stuff come from a guy who was super successful at what he does really drew me in. And I went through a period where like I was reading so much of different books and listening to people that I almost like had too much information. It was like information overload, and everybody has their own ideas of things. And so I was like too in my head of like, what's the right thing to do? Like, what's the right way to be? Somebody tells me that I should be a monk. Somebody tells me that I should care even more about waking up at 4 a.m. and going hard all day. So I was like, I don't know what one is right. So that was when I started going, when I started going to therapy, I was like reading a bunch of books and stuff like that. My therapist was like, hey, put down majority of these books, pick one person that you feel like you really resonate with and just like listen, like consume them, but really listen to yourself. Like think about like you have all this information, you're understanding it. Listen to like what you really feel is good for you. And so that ended up being like Gary's stuff really resonated with me. I started listening to his stuff more. I stopped listening and reading any other books, like anything, put everything else aside. And would just listen to Gary and then listen to myself. Like I would like have conversations with myself. Do I believe this? Do I agree with this? What do I want to take away from this? And so Gary has been that dude that I've listened to consistently. And now having done more understanding of like my personality and like legitimately working with like personality coach, like have you ever done the Myers-Briggs test where it's like ENFP, INFJ, like that kind of stuff? It's like fun stuff. My girlfriend's team has a personality team that does like essentially helps people understand how they like to work their best. So he does that testing on them, much like deeper, like a longer version of that gives them like a readout of like this is your personality type based on your test, ENFP, whatever it is. I did that test. And like, I've always thought that I was similar to Gary because I thought the same way as him and stuff. Turns out I get done with that test and he's like, bro, you are the exact same thing as him. And it's like a small percentage of people in the world that are this same makeup. And so I was like, bro, I felt it, like that we're similar and we feel the same way and think the same way. And so he's always been a dude that I've related to, that looks at things the same way, that does a lot of the same business, makes a lot of the same business decisions that I would make. And so now he's like the out of anybody that I listen to, he's the dude that I listen to the most by far, and the dude that I support the most.
Yeah, he's I could not agree more with how you said that. And he's been instrumental for me as well. Just kind of that guy that, like you said, you can go back to and listen to, and it's gonna hit. Whatever he says, doesn't matter whether he's talking about TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever the case, he's got just a good approach to it. And he comes from a positive way, and which is so important. We only got a couple minutes left. I want to talk about.
Let's keep it going. Well, let's push this. Let's go for a little longer.
All right. I like it. I appreciate it.
Of course.
You've talked about how you're excited about what's to come now. Gary's got NFTs that he's diving headfirst into with VFriends. You've got TikTok that you're crushing both on an educational level as well as your other platform. You've got Honey House that was crushing. Like, what do you got going on right now moving forward? What are you looking at? What are you maybe chewing on as far as 2021 and on?
Yeah. It's a great question. I really love educational content. Like I really love educating. Like I really feel, bro, it's funny. I really feel like one of my great passions is to be an actual teacher. I have a sister, my little sister is turning 10, and I have a little brother that's a similar age too. And like, when I go and visit them and pick them up from school in like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, I'm like fired up. I'm like, I want to do this. Like I legit want to do this. I kind of want to do it on a bigger scale, but I want to I really like teaching. So for me, I've been wondering like what it is that I want to teach, and social media and the internet is something that I've always, like we talked about from the beginning. It's just something that I've always been into and been good at, like been really uniquely skilled at building things on the internet. And so that's where my head is at right now. I want to first start building out my educational content on TikTok to the point where I'll give you the game plan right now. I want to first and foremost, for income, I want to teach brands how to build on social media, particularly on TikTok, because it's what I'm most skilled at and putting most attention, and they have the most opportunity in right now. So that's my day-to-day is I sit with brands, show them what kind of content to make, help them make the content, sometimes even make it myself. And that's my like day-to-day job that's under my agency. Well, I want to build that to be big enough to where I can hire my own content team to help me put more of my own educational content out. And with my own educational content, I want to build a big enough platform on TikTok to where I can then go into YouTube and start building my own YouTube and educational content too. From there, I think once I have that YouTube built out, I'll start advertising to do some sort of a class that'll be like an education, whether it's through a school, whether it's actually like a college professor type thing, or whether it's just like my own course kind of thing, mastermind kind of thing. I really don't like that idea of like the mastermind that's paid, and then I'm like Ty Lopez, which I don't think is like my vibe. Right. I might go the free route because I love teaching and I really want to just put more content out. But I really think that I'm gonna go build this. This is my dream. I'm gonna go build this on TikTok. Then I'm gonna be able to start spending more time on YouTube because I'll have a team that's gonna help me with the brand stuff, the educating brands. Then once I go from YouTube, I'll start building out my own platform of content or teaching. And then from there, simultaneously, when I'm working with brands, because I now have a platform that's big enough, I'll be able to take percentages of equity from these brands, if not launch my own brands and then use them through those channels that I have built out to launch my own brands and do cool shit with. Yeah. That's what I want to do.
I love it. That's so sick. Man, now it's just time, right? That's what it comes down to, putting in the work.
It's time.
Yeah.
Consistency, time. And like I've kind of started that with like doing Honey House and doing Triple Deke. We were doing
You're testing the waters.
Before. Yeah, and they were all great. And like Honey House, like it's on pause. Whether we do it again or not will be seen. But like that has helped me a ton with understanding TikTok, with understanding what brands need, with understanding what works. Reset helped me really work with brands. That was our wellness festival that we did for 2 years, which is still on pause. We don't know if that'll ever come back. Yeah. Triple Deke is still going. That's my hockey brand. That's going to be a 10-year play. It's great. That's going to be that, like we just said, hockey is so far behind basketball that it's just like an uphill battle. That is like, we're just crawling up that hill right now. We're like climbing. And we know that when that tipping point happens to where players are actually starting to look for content and starting to look for branding, we will have so much experience and relationships with these guys that will be the ones that people will want to go to for it. But right now it's just like kind of like we're waiting. We're like sharpening irons. We're like waiting. We're like, we know it's going to happen. We're ready for it when it happens. And that's going to be something that'll be fun when it does, however long that takes. And right now for me, it's literally just like going hard into education, connecting with people, meeting with people like yourself, and trying to like build that network for whenever that all happens.
Well, I think there's 2 points there. I think the first is like how rewarding it is to be able to provide that education and see people put that into action. Like for you, a real world example would be guys who have literally started posting. I swear I saw something on LinkedIn about a guy who started posting on TikTok every day because of you, and now he's crushing. It's all it takes, right? It's just consistency, putting in the work, and finding your niche and capitalizing on it. And I think that, you bring up sharpening the iron there, and I think that's realistically what every smart business individual, whatever the case, business, sports, whatever it is, you need to be prepared for when the opportunity arises to attack. And if you aren't prepared, then you haven't been doing the work prior to that to be able to get to that point, and you never will if you don't lay that foundation. So I think that's
and I think also in that, that's a great point. And I think also in that, sometimes the preparation you need to do is to just try shit. Like sometimes there's no way to prepare because you're thrown into something that you didn't know. You can't prepare for shit that you don't know. So
Gary says it best: taste, right? You got to taste it, taste 100%. Everything, try things out.
100%. And like that, literally Honey House is a perfect example of that. Cause we were like, bro, we're getting all of these people. We have 8 people in this house. Everybody's putting $2,000 up to pay for this together for the month. We're going into this blind. We don't know if this is going to work. We really have no idea, but we're going to try and we're going to own it. If it doesn't work, we'll tell everybody like, we're going to try and pay you guys all back. Like it's unfortunate that if it doesn't work, but we're going to go through with it and just like really just test shit out and try it. And lo and behold, after we really dedicated ourselves to it, it started to just really work. And it's like you said, like Gary said, it's such a, for me now, even understanding myself better, because I'm such a guy that loves to plan ahead because I want everything to be perfect and I want all of the cards to align and everything to be just right. And like a lot of the times that's just fucking impossible. And so I'm like, yo, I'm over preparing now. I'm almost preparing to the point where I'm like, I just don't want to go in and have any mistakes. And it's impossible to not have any mistakes. So I would rather allow myself to go quicker and jump into it and make mistakes and then learn and make mistakes and learn and get better and get better and get better. Rather than just like sit back and wait for the perfect moment.
Yeah, it's hilarious you bring that up because I've just accepted the fact that I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to fuck up. There are things that I'm frustrated with or I don't do well. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to learn from that if I don't go through it. And if I don't have the ability to look back and be like, okay, I did make a mistake there. I shouldn't have sworn 10 seconds ago. Like maybe that's not what the audience wants. Whatever the case is, I think that's like, so true. We could chat all day. I appreciate your time so much. One of the things that we wrap up every episode with is asking our guest what their biggest piece of advice would be to the next generation of athletes. JT Barnett, what would your piece of advice be?
Self-audit. Let me explain what that means. I would take some time. I would go, whether that's in a room, whether that's in your car, whether that's on a walk, whether that's like around other people. I would like bring yourself to a place where you feel really good, like listening to music, like you're in a vibe. And I would really ask myself, like, what do I want in this life? Like, what do I want to do with my life? What would my dream be? How would I look? What would my day-to-day be? Who would I be hanging out with? What would my relationships be like? What would I be eating? Like get as descriptive with it as possible so that you can see it almost like a picture in your head of like, what does the ideal life look like for you? That would be my first thing. And then from there, really ask yourself if the way that you're doing your day-to-day is heading towards that life. If the way that you're going about the days is leading you towards the life that you have now recognized that you want. And that's a challenging question to ask yourself, because a lot of people will be like, damn, I know the life that I want to be living, but I am not putting in the work to live towards that life right now. Like, I'm like really eating unhealthy. My relationships around me are not healthy. I'm hanging out with people that aren't good for me. I'm working something that I don't enjoy, like that I really don't enjoy, that I know I don't enjoy, that's not even paying me well, that's not doing anything for me. And I think having that conversation with yourself, it's a hard conversation to have, but it allows you to be like, cool, now that I understand where I am and am selling myself short, what can I change that will allow me to get closer to that ideal life? What can I do? What can I do today? What small, like, consistent actions can I do that will get me closer to living the life that I want to live? Whether that's as small as like, bro, I'm going to start drinking water more. I'm going to start going on a walk every day. I'm going to start, like, when somebody is super disrespectful to me, I'm going to like really try and not talk back to them, not like push back against them. I'm going to like let it go. Or like, I'm no longer, instead of answering 10 of my parents' calls, I'm going to only answer 4 of them, because I know that every time I talk to them, they really don't leave me feeling good. They make me feel worse about myself. Whatever that is, start taking the small actions towards that. That would be my advice, because it is really like anything that you want to do, as cliche as it sounds so fucking cliche, but like the life that you really want to live, you actually can, like you legitimately can. And it starts with having those conversations and that self-awareness with yourself, and having that and asking yourself those questions. So then you can start understanding what you're not doing. So then you can start doing the things you need to.
Self-audit, reverse engineer what you got to do to get to that point, and you'll be able to accomplish it, right?
Yes, sir.
JT, this was dope, brother. I appreciate your time more than you know. I wish you an incredible Wednesday evening, and I look forward to chatting again, Brian.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it, brother.
Thank you, folks, for tuning in to the 85th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring JT Barnett. I sincerely hope you guys gained a bit of insight and appreciation for what he brings to the table, not only from an athletic perspective, but also just a mentality and an approach to life that is refreshing and something that I think everyone can take a little piece of and apply it to their daily life. An incredible conversation. If you guys enjoyed it, please share it with someone. Drop a like, hit that subscribe button, whatever you got to do. We're growing, we're having fun in the process, and we appreciate every single one of you for tuning in. Jordan Maslin is our producer. Ian Singleton is our videographer. My name is David Stark, and I appreciate you guys once again. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.